Hello everyone and welcome to H3671, and we are recording here at Kvarntorpshögen, which is the only hill in the area of Närke. And around us we have the plains, so this is the only thing sticking up. And actually it's not a proper mountain, it's a man-made mountain consisting of gasoline infused slate. And oddly enough, this very mountain is burning. The slate caught fire when they constructed the hill, the mound, and it's been burning ever since. So what they did with it, they turned it into an art exhibition. So they put a lot of statues here, but you can also, if you want to do downhill skiing. It seemed to be a very, very hilly ski place. I think it's red or even black. It goes directly down. It's not a green one. If you are uncertain how to ski, you shouldn't ski here. And today I will talk a little bit more, just shortly before I freeze to death here up on the mound, about meaning. And it's the theory of connectivism, and it has trait of different things, but one of those things that is very telling is that they use metaphors I understood now from the internet. So the web, I suggested, is actually one of those things that made the theory from the beginning. And it's a very modern theory. They look at knowledge like the World Wide Web, interconnected, and in this interconnectedness, which is not stable in the way that we usually think knowledge is, there is also meaning. Meaning is merging from this interconnectivity. And this is a very interesting philosophical question, and it's very hard to answer. And we used the help of the Klein bottle earlier, and we also used negative thinking, that is criticizing the idea of possibility of representing the world. But it can also be put in another way, and here you hear from connectivism. And there is, can you consider properties separated from physical entities that are instances of them? That's the problem in a nutshell. Is there a physical existence apart from the properties these entities have? Thus, for example, can we think of red without thinking of a red thing, only redness? At the time, we had earlier said, and this is from the article, that there is not such a thing as redness in itself without an object. Very hard to tell what that would be. And that's sort of interesting. Me as a painter, I've also wondered about that. Does redness exist without the paint? Is it possible for me to think about the redness that doesn't have a color, that doesn't have a piece of paint? And I came to the conclusion, not. Very hard for me to imagine a red color. I think it's a very good reason to use red color, because there's loads of them. But there are at the same time red colors that have been invented. And after they are invented, you can also imagine that red color. But it's very hard to think of a red color you've never seen, never perceived. but we still have a sense that redness is real. It is somewhere in between properties and entities, somewhere in between. Something you can understand and something that is very useful in daily life. And this is quite important. We have something that is not something you can directly point to as such. Redness can only be hinted at. And redness is actually a very good example for what meaning could be. What is meaning? Because we can use that in regular language, and somebody can present different colors to me, and I can say to that person, that is not what I meant by redness, or I didn't mean that specific type of redness. It's a problem, and I actually had myself. I was trying to paint a car, not paint the car, but make a painting of a car, and the redness didn't come to me. I could see it in the car, but I couldn't make it on the palette. I could not arrange the colors. And then somebody saw the problem and said to me, that is Ferrari red. You need to order that. And I ordered it, and I saw it was the red color I wanted. So there is a meaning somewhere here. And the meaning is very interesting because the web is making meaning. The connectivism shows that meaning is an emergent phenomena in the relation of all the objects. And even if you cannot point to meaning, it's still important in certain ways. And we can actually, in many cases, tell if that was the thing we meant or not. So it seems that we're now talking about something that is partly apart from the entities. In connectivism, this is explained in the following manner. They say that the concept redness is an example of what they call distributed meaning. Because there is no particular place we could point to where the meaning redness is located. And that goes exactly this is exactly how I remember how it was with paints. You can sort of point to a meaning, and it's not part of the paints, but it's at the same time not as real as the paints. It's something else. And we can actually say that we have a concept such as redness in our minds. And this is in itself something we could only know through interpretation of the myriad patterns presented in our consciousness and our behavior. No doubt we have numerous other similar concepts. However, because they are not salient, because they never play a higher order cognitive behavior, we do not recognize them. We are, in a sense, blind to them until some process, for instance the Rorschach test, they are searched for and observed. So in one sense, one could actually say that the concept redness in our mind is similar to having liberal as a description of a political party. Not something you can observe, not something you can point to, but you can still know it. And they call this low-level sub-symbolic concepts, and they supposed to exist in our minds. Collections of connected neurons, possibly, that themselves do not have meaning, we would or could recognize, but which in combination eventually form higher order structures that do correspond with the meaning of words or melodies or icons or something else, such as redness. Saying that we have the concept of redness in our mind is to pick our particularly salient set of collections of connected neurons. And I think this is similar. Let me give another example. When you learn another word in a language that is not so close to your own language, well, sometimes it's also true with languages that are actually quite close. But I have an example here. There's a Spanish word that is used, especially in Mexico. We visited Alan Emreen. He just came back from Mexico. That's my association process, and I come to think of it. And that word is really funny because it's so hard to grasp. Its meaning, it's almost impossible to explain. But they have a term in Spanish called ahora or ahora, and is the same word as agora in Portuguese, and it means, well, pretty soon. It's supposed to mean now, but it means pretty soon, more like strax in Swedish.
Adesso in Italian.
Yes. Adesso, agora, ahora. But because it's a rather slow culture in some aspects, I don't want to be prejudiced here, but ahora could take a rather long time. So often you hear, especially in Mexico, ahora used for the whole day. Well, you could say now you have a bit of a problem, because if you want something done now, in this instance, what do you do then? Well, they invented an expression. They call it little now, ahorita. And this ahorita has a tendency to mean super directly. But just leave your stuff and do it directly. Oh, it's a lovely day today. We just rush into the car and we drive to the playa or something like that. We do it directly. It's a fire going on in the house. We need to leave the place ahorita. And now, and this is an actual process for me. Now I thought I had the meaning of the word. Well, I was wrong. And this is extremely interesting, because how did I know I was wrong? Well, it wasn't I used the word and somebody reacted or something happened that shouldn't happen. But I listened to some people say that we're going to do something ahorita. And when I heard that, it sounded like that was not in this instance. And it also sounded that it wasn't even in the same day. It was somewhere in the distant future. But they were supposed to do it on a certain point, not as big. Ahora, the other expression, is big. It stretches out. Could be the whole day. But I'd say could maximum be the whole day. It has to be within a day. But it stretches out in a bit. It's flexible. But ahorita is not flexible. It's more of a point. But oddly enough, something happened to the word. And this goes to show it wasn't an inventor of the word. It never is. Because words are not controllable. We cannot control the meaning of them. So it come to mean I will do something that is sort of a point, but I will do it somewhere else in time. You can use it for ahorita, I will jump into the sauna or something like that, because it's a one-time thing. It's a point. It doesn't take a long time to do that. It's impossible to explain this meaning. And I don't even know if you can find it in a dictionary. Maybe a very pedagogical dictionary. Well, this is really, really odd. And it's only in Mexico. And when I noticed that was a child who grew up somewhere else, he spoke Spanish, but he'd been told by his parents they were going to do something ahorita, and he thought it meant right now. It didn't. And of course, you can live in that culture decades without having no idea that the meaning is not exactly as you think. But I can explain it to you now. I can explain my experience. There's nothing you can point to. There's nothing you can see. I can hardly even write it down. But I can sort of point to it. I can give you some conception. And actually, the funny thing, you could have good use of this. I don't know, maybe. That could be the case. So this thing with meaning is quite interesting. And it's described in connectivism in a more sensible way than we usually come upon meaning. My first encounter with meaning in a more systematic way was nonsensical, because that was in linguistics, and one of the more common linguistic theories says that to every word there is a fixed meaning. How could that be? What sort of angel or troll does that? What makes it sure that each and every word has a fixated meaning? I got a sense this is nonsensical. And it is nonsensical, of course. It's just, somebody told me, a practical tool. Well, I'd say it's not even a practical tool, because it's going to lead your thinking completely astray and you won't understand anything. I can give more example. One example that I actually read here, but I have some association on my own. The first time I heard Paris, it was mentioned that my parents went to Paris on their honeymoon. Paris didn't mean anything to me. I didn't know anything about geography. I didn't know anything about France. I had no idea that Paris was the capital of France or what it was. I had no idea even if it had a big size. But I had some conception it was a place you went to. It wasn't around these parts. And that meaning I caught directly. And how is that possible? How is it possible without any explanation I realized it wasn't anywhere close by? And here connectivism is so much better than intentional idea, because that lies in things we have no idea about. We don't know how meaning or even the words themselves come about. And what connectivism trying to tell us, we can never know that. It's ludicrous to say that. And I can just give you some example. I mentioned the other day quantum perception. It's obvious we have quantum perception. We know that the world is quantum mechanical. Obviously human beings have quantum perception. But in this case I try to explain it in regular sense. It's the tone of voice. You can hear it on the tone of voice that is sort of a distant place. It doesn't have this Heimlichkeit that Heidegger would tell, that you have this warm voice to say, I want to go home, eller hemmet as we say in Swedish. It seems distance. And I also got a perception it was a rather interesting place, or a special place in some way. You can hear that on the voice. And those things goes unnoticed when we use the horrid word intention that should be banned from every dictionary, because it just is so incredibly simplified. It's a child's idea how the word should work. To every word we stick an intention. And that's how we solve the problem. Actually, it doesn't explain squat, zero, zilch. It's useless. Connectivism is much better. Then you don't explain how come about a word has a meaning and how you get knowledge. Because you don't create knowledge. You do knowledge. You have an intuitive sense of knowledge. That's what I had as a kid. And much later I learned to realize that Paris was a town, and then I realized it was some country called France. Still had no idea what France was, but I could hear in the voice it was this and that country. Slowly it emerged somehow, a meaning. A picture became clearer and clearer. And this sounds very much like the hologram we were talking the other day. First you have only small bits, but you still have like a whole picture, but it's dimly lit. It's very obscure, very foggy. And afterhand the picture becomes clearer and clearer and clearer, and in the end you know what it is somehow, and you know for certain that it exists. And you don't have to add existence. It's like useless as intention, completely useless. Actually, existence and intention, I think they go hand in hand. I never thought about that before. They almost sound the same, but they go hand in hand somewhere. If you have existence, you need intention to play this ludicrous game. No, this says rather that in connectivism, meaning is an emergent thing. It comes from the synergy of everything in the connectivity. It's a merging factor in the web of everything. And what the thing is decided by the whole web, not in itself, not isolated, not for-handen, not put in a box observed by some Martian. I think there's another example. If you gave, for instance, earlier we were talking about the chandelier, put that in a box, give it to some aliens, would they understand what it is? No. Why not? Because they don't have all the web. You need the whole web to understand what a chandelier is. It's not enough to look at it. It doesn't tell you anything. You don't have the object just looking at it. And the aliens can put it in a machine. They can register how many atoms there are, what color it has, the weight of it. They can use length, width, depth, you name it. They can use everything. They won't know anything what it is. Those criteria doesn't cover what an object are. Not at all. Even though big philosopher has said that. Philosophers like the earlier Wittgenstein, he didn't think enough. That's why he came with some of the ideas that were so incorrect. And Bertrand Russell, of course, in his ideas of what makes a property, he says property is coming from a group. When the group is together, you have a property. That's just nonsense. My God, how can you even come up with such stuff? Did he even play a part in the world? Does it make any sense to say the properties are coming from a group? Who is doing the delineation of the group? Who's putting the group into some sort of box or whatever he wants to circle? And I'm a bit older than my colleague here, Kalle, but I have the big unfortune to experience Bertrand Russell firsthand already when I was young, because some lunatic at the school department decided that we should use this model of sets to teach young children what is a number. So we were exposed to these sets, and they didn't make any sense to us because they are highly abstract. They're not only I would say, philosophically nonsense. They're also highly abstract. And we are exposed to these sets, and the teacher have to put on a nice face and show us those. Here we have a bunch of rabbits, here we have a bunch of apples. They are making a set. Can you now, children, understand what is 5? Can't you see 5 here? I put 5 cows in the set. Can't you see 5 here? You need a bloody number to have 5 cows. Don't you understand that? You need to be able to count. This thing doesn't help me at all. That is some Lord Bertrand Russell thought that, because he already know how to count and he forgot it. And then he relearned that, and he thought he made a fantastic discovery, how numbers come about. It's the same thing that I would open up this Android and say, oh, I know how to make an Android. Nobody knew that before. He's stealing inventions that wasn't his. And not only that, his explanations how the inventions came about are just ludicrous, simplified. They are, I would even say, they're demented. So what do we say when the meaning of the word Paris is distributed? What we mean in addition is that the meaning of the word is constituted in part out of the same elements that constitute the meaning of these other words. And the examples you can sort of have with Paris is the Eiffel Tower, the city, France, Champs-Élysées, even Kurt Vonnegut. You have loads of different things. But you can think of Paris as the connection of all these things, and yet more, and yet more. Because Eiffel Tower needs some connections. Needs maybe connection with other towers. Probably it would need connections with other seaworthy things in other countries, like the Colosseum in Rome, or the Big Ben in London. Such stuff to be easily understandable. I need to understand that's a monument. Otherwise, it will be just a piece of metal for me. I'll be in the same position as these aliens. I can just see the aliens in front of me, trying to investigate what is this chandelier. They have all the equipment in the world, and even stuff we can't even think of. But it doesn't matter. They will never ever get the meaning of what the chandelier is. And here comes the funny part. We said the surprises should be for the podcast, but here comes the surprise. I didn't think about that before, but exactly this we have already made. We human beings, well, I shouldn't include myself in that group because I wasn't part of the decision, but we human beings sent something out in space that was almost like the chandelier, and it was supposed to reach aliens. Well, maybe by now it's reached some aliens. What will they be presented with? Well, there's a whole lot of stuff. For instance, there's a record. You can hear different people like Martin Luther King. I don't know who else. There's a bunch of people. Winston Churchill, I think. And then you have a recording of music, and then you have a lot of photos to show these aliens. How does it look here on Earth? So they will understand. What were they thinking? It's just impossible for them to understand anything from this material. Okay, they can investigate it with all the things they have, but how on earth could they understand anything of those things that was sent to them? It's completely impossible. And I bet you they wouldn't even understand what a human being is, even though it's central. I think it's the Vitruvius or the Vesuvian Man by Leonardo da Vinci they sent. I don't think they would know what is the circle and what is a human being. How could they know that? We don't even know how these aliens look like. I think it was an assumption made. And the assumption made here, this will go to some aliens way over there at the other point of the universe. And these aliens, they will be looking like human beings. But for some mad reason, they will have the same history as we have. Exactly. With no difference. It has to be exactly the same. Otherwise, the meaning will shift. And they won't be able to understand Martin Luther King or who else it was. It's so nonsensical. It does. How did they think? What was the plan? But this serves like a good example what connectivism is not. It's a protest against ludicrous thinking, oversimplified thinking, or just weirdos. Because this is just weird to think that meaning could be like flying around in the universe, and that meaning would follow the spaceship, go to the aliens, and when they're having dinner they can have a look at this and they would understand that was a human being, and that was Leonardo da Vinci who made that stuff. And we understand, we can't, maybe we don't know everything about Martin Luther King, but we know he was a nice guy and he was probably some sort of civil rights person fighting for the civil rights of maybe minorities. Actually, we have minorities here on Alpha Centauri as well, although they are not black, they are green. But you see here how we've been thinking, and representational thinking, it does have its downsides, and these are definitely one of those downsides. And I think I'm pretty sure if anything could make any sense of this thing they sent out in space is, as one person suggested, what could happen is some microbes enter the space shuttle, and at least the aliens can find some inhabitants on Earth, and they will understand something of our life, hopefully. But all the representations they put on the ship, they're completely useless. They're completely useless. It doesn't matter if they look exactly like us. It doesn't matter if they even have a mound like this Quantorpshöjden. Nothing that matters. They have to have the same history, they have to have the same web, and they have to have the same connectivism. And it seems in the West, we want to explain how meaning comes about. And by trying to explain that, we destroy the whole understanding. This is a project that should not be done. It has been done, it shouldn't be done, because it destroys meaning, destroys everything, understanding. So I think I round up here. We're cold enough. It made me a little bit warmer thinking about the space shuttle. I even forgot the name of it. It wasn't called Viking. It was a bit earlier than Viking. I have no idea what it was called. Well, over and out from the Quantorpshöjden. Thank you very much.
Thank you.